All right, aloha, my friends and family. Welcome back to this week's episode of my newly named podcast, the Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast. I'm super excited to share with you this week my guest, Jared Bull. He comes to us from Colorado. He is the transformation coach. And after listening to his bio, I'm sure you know exactly why he's a guest on this show. So thank you so much for being here, Jared, and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get into this. Anyone who gives me a platform to talk about transformation, I think it's really, you'll feel it. I get pretty jazzed up about it.
Oh, yeah, I think we both do, which is why I'm excited for this conversation. So, the listeners to my show are used to me bringing on guests who have been through quite a bit of transformation. They've had some sort of extraordinary personal perseverance story that they've come through. For people who don't know you, just give us some insight, a little bit about you and your transformation and what got you to where you are today.
So I would say mine really started ultimately. I think I started coming back home to myself, who I really am, my soul's expression of the world, probably when I was 22. So I was getting out of the Marine Corps. I just had experienced 2 combat deployments. And combat for me was really an entrance into a whole nother dimension and experience of life. It's such a fascinating environment. Your nervous system speeds up so quickly, so everything slows down in your environment. There's this clinical psychological condition called tachosphere, which is the speeding up of the body's nervous system, which gives you an experience of reality moving very, very slow. And like law enforcement officers, military people who've experienced combat actually report seeing bullets go by them, like almost like in the Matrix. So I had a lot of those experiences in combat where, one, I felt more alive than I ever had before. Like combat and war is one of those, edge of the human experiences. I think giving birth is an edge of the human experience. Combat is edge of the human experience. You're playing with the borders of life and death. So really cool things happen to our awareness and our consciousness, I think, when we're in those spaces. So that was really the start of my wanting to go inward and really understanding, like, what does it mean to be human? Like, am I more than my body? Am I more than my thinking? Am I more than my feeling? Like, what's beyond that? What's the awareness that's beyond that? So that was the start of it. And as I was getting out of the Marine Corps, and I was like losing all my conditioning, some of my religious conditioning, my cultural, my social conditioning, seeing through the military, industrial complex, all that other stuff. I started to realize, okay, there's a bigger game at play, because my body would go to sleep, but my mind and my awareness would stay completely aware. So for me, going from a waking state to where my body's active to I'd actually experience my body going to sleep, but my awareness would still be fully online. So I would transition into the dreams straight from physical reality. There was no separation between the two. So I would have my waking consciousness would just naturally fall into a dream state with no loss of lucidity. So I would experience my dream world just as real as my physical world. And so that totally opened up a whole new way of exploring my inner awareness and consciousness. And I wasn't sure if I was going crazy. I wasn't sure if I was becoming schizophrenic, because, I was obviously healing a lot from war and the PTSD that happened there. But I am a researcher. I do pride myself with a level of intellectual, I love studying. I love playing with the mental realm. I exist mostly beyond thought, but I do love playing with that. So I was reading a lot of books at that time, really understanding what was happening in my awareness and in my consciousness. And I realized, lucid dreaming, out of body experiences, these are actually normal parts of their human condition, and people have mapped these out. So I really started getting involved in that and getting excited around that. And it actually stemmed from my combat experiences. When you're in combat, modern warfare, the enemy's always there. You can be attacked at any moment. It's not like traditional old school warfare where there's one side here and one side there. You fight during the day, and then you go back and you sleep during night, and then you fight during the day. That was kind of a common agreement of doing warfare up until, I think, the modern age. So it's a long way for me to say my body would go to sleep because it was so tired, but my awareness had been trained through my military training and through my environment to be always aware because my body could die. So that was really my entrance into, I guess you could call like the spiritual realm, how consciousness works. It was really from combat. And then when I was 20, so when I was 22, I had my first, I guess like that was like my first awakening experience. And then when I was 24, I had my full blown Kundalini awakening, which just was all the unwinding of all the conditioning that had ever been in place upon me. And not just my conditioning, but the conditioning that I inherited, obviously, from my ancestors, my generational line. And so that was a pretty intense process of like 4.5, 5 years. That was really hard, just integrating all that generational stuff, moving past that, grounding my soul's essence and experience in the expression of the physical world and never leave, having a pure connection between the two. And so I wouldn't say I was over that until I'd probably say like 26 or 27. And I started doing my transformational work full time when I was 25. But it wasn't until I was about 26, 27, was I finally at a point where I'm like, okay, I know who I am. I'm in touch with where I come from. I know, what transformation is needed in the world. I see my place in the grander context of the world, and I'm all in on it. Like all my finances, my entire life, all my energy is moving towards the transformational work and helping human beings integrate their own transformations, helping organizations integrate their transformations. And so that's really like, I guess, a long response to the question, but I didn't know how to answer it any other
Thank
way.
you. No, well, thank you for sharing that. There's a couple of points I wanted to speak to. And I'm in terms of the listeners, like hearing your story is obviously a very powerful story that, probably many people won't relate to the idea of being in actual physical combat, but what we can all relate to is sort of like the daily spiritual inner warfare that we have within us, in our
100%.
mindset and our emotions. And
Yes.
as I hear you speak, like the other thing that I noticed that I heard that resonated with me, that I can completely relate to, and I have a very similar experience in my own way, is that when we step into this sort of like place of, people say awakening or whatever, and I think it can happen several times. I think there's several layers to peel, as I heard you share
100%.
as well. But there's also this space of when we get in there, it's not easy and it's a little messy. And some people can get trapped in there, and
Absolutely.
and it's hard to get out. And one of the things I love to speak to is, and I myself found myself the same way, trapped in the healing, literally trapped in the addiction to
Yes.
healing, making myself better. Everything's broken, but I'm really good at fixing. And I felt like it took me about 4 years as well. And especially when we get into in the spiritual community, there's so many ways that we can even bypass and we can avoid, and when we're in that space. And
Yes.
I love to say, and this is what I really love about your work, is, in my words, I love to say, and this is what coaches are really good at, and it's something that I see in you, and we've talked about the importance of reflection. But
Mhm.
what happens when we set our intention and our energy on who we're becoming versus who we've been? So
Yes.
we have to give ourselves permission to be in that space of the wounding and the hurt and the awakening and all of that, and whatever that is. It's messiness, I guess. I like to say, bless this mess. And then there's a point in time where we get to choose, and you've done this and I've done this, and
Mhm.
this is really the space that we're in, but we get to choose who we're going to become based on that. So tell me a little bit about how you work in this area with other people, how you take people through sort of like what you call the mastering the art of transformation.
Mm.
What does that look like?
It's great. Yeah, great question. And I love that you brought that framework in. So it's normal, like that modulation between going up in light and love and just constantly doing inner work. Like it is an addiction, it's unhealthy. Um, it's normal. It's part and parcel, I believe, from just, the thousands of people that I've coached and worked with and the organizations I've been in, that it's a normal part to go up, light and love, happy, everything is possible. And then also go down into the deep darkness, shadow, and primitiveness of what it means to be human. And that's how we're supposed to grow and pulse. Like that's built into the experience. What I've noticed, just looking at the patterns over my career, not only within my own life, but also just working through people's transformations, and organizations transformations, is you're going to go through periods of like light, love. If we're talking about the y-axis, like we're using a graph, the y-axis, vertical consciousness. On the top part, there's light and love, angels, all that other great stuff. And then on the lower part, there's darkness, shadow, deep, and like all the bad stuff. It's normal for us to go down to the darkness, but we shouldn't stay there. It's not normal to stay there. And that's the problem, is some people get caught and they get trapped there. Either one, because they don't know their experience, what's happening to them, or two, they don't understand how transformation works. I had, I'd say about 8 or 9 friends commit suicide. Like more of my friends died after combat than actually in combat. Like we had a lot of people get hurt in combat. But when I got back, and over the years, I just, a lot of my friends and my, people in my platoon kept killing themselves. And so I was thinking to myself, like, what's really going on here? Like, because they're trapped in darkness. And so true transformation is actually death. And I think sometimes when people get in that real dark space, it's because they don't know what's happening to them. Like a part of you is dying. Like that's like you had a survival pattern that was related to an environment that no longer serves you. So you have to let that go in order to come back to the next new thing. And so that's the pulsation of life. It's like, yeah, you're going to go into darkness. That's normal. You go into the darkness. It's not normal to stay there. And if you have a guide, a coach, counselor, healer, someone who understands transformation at its essence, they don't allow you to stay there. They allow you to acknowledge the darkness, the hardship, the struggle, the striving, but then you come back up and you meet back in the horizontal plane, y-axis. Here's my past. Here's my future, right? And then you come back up, you integrate the wisdom of that dark experience, and you bring that back to the horizontal plane. You share it with the world. You help the human condition, and then you go back up into light and love. And that is literally the pulsation of our spirit and our consciousness. We pulse up into light and love, good stuff, pulse down into shadow, bad stuff, primitive, come back to center, human condition, express with humanity. And that is the pulsation of our spirit. Like literally when something's alive, it's pulsing. Like that's like, like metal. Okay, I'm going to check the person's pulse. And so that's how our spirit moves through the physical dimension and integrates wisdom and experience. But our society and our culture doesn't understand that framework. And so what happens is, people aren't in their own power. They don't have a good understanding of the framework of transformation. So they get trapped in those dark places. And they're told they're messed up. They get, they're told that they have some sort of disease or mental illness or something like that, when it's not true. It's just a time. Similarly, I see people get trapped up in the light and love. Oh, everything's great, light and love. My spiritual community is wonderful. I'm spiritual bypassing everything. And I don't condone that either. So it's normal to, like a sine wave, to go up and down. And as long as you're going up and down, you're moving forward in your human development, you're expanding, you're growing, you're pulsating in your human experience. But as soon as I see someone who's either trapped up here or trapped down there, it's not a good sign. We got to get them out of that place, in that space. And this happens to everyone. It happens to, people who don't know much about transformation and who might be at one level of socioeconomic status. and it happens to, the millionaires and people running corporations and C-suite. Like I coach, I've worked with every type of individual, I feel like, at this point in my career. So understanding that framework, I think, is really key and helpful, because it's like the dark times aren't going to last and the light and love times aren't going to last either. It's built into the human experience to have all of it. And it's just about moving through it and knowing what terrain you're navigating, having the right tools and guides to move through that terrain naturally.
Yes, and I'm hearing you as you speak to it, like how important it really is truly to have support,
Oh
to
my
have somebody
gosh.
who's been there and done that. I mean, I'm sure you and I both wouldn't be where we are today without the support that we've had. And so I just want to
100%.
say, because I know that there are people that, particularly probably, I'm guessing the type of people that you attract, the people that I attract. Also, it's like they think they can do it all. So,
Yeah.
it's humbling to be in that moment of surrender. And also it's an opportunity to receive. It's actually really an opportunity to just receive support. And
Mm.
there's such, like, your energy field just expands so much. And in that moment that you're willing to just humbly say, like, I don't, just because I can doesn't mean I have to, and I can totally receive and move forward. I wanted to ask you a question around that. As I love to use the word expansion, contraction, the balance of being and becoming. You're calling it the sine wave. One of the things that I've learned, it's true for me, is really practicing non-attachment either way, which
Yeah.
you and I are both passionate. Like, we've got fiery souls. We love life and in all of its
Yes.
full dimension. So non-attachment is, when I say practice, like, it's literally a practice, because I really do love the excitement and fun part. And I'm willing to go in the deep shadow. And so it's a practice of non-attachment. What is your sort of secret to staying in that neutral, like, we go through this being and
Yes.
becoming, but how do you stay neutral? How do you
That's
stay in
great.
that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's this word in the yogic tradition, and I find the English language, just like not suitable for the human experience at all. Like I remember during the pandemic, I can't remember, but I literally had to invent 6 new words during the pandemic to describe my experience.
I was just
Um,
thinking, put them on a t-shirt.
yeah, I should. That would be a great idea. Just put them on a t-shirt and wear it. Wow, thank you so much. Because language is so important. Like language takes an individual human experience and connects it to the collective experience, and there's validation there. So language itself is a validating, it's a validating tool. It gives, if used correctly, it gives people strength and validation of their inner experiences. And it's really cool. The actual original Sanskrit knew this. So the Sanskrit language, if you actually study it, I was an English major, English and anthropology major in college. And what's really, really cool about it is the Sanskrit language, they knew that human experience evolves as a culture evolves and grows. So they knew that you had to constantly be inventing new words to describe the ever-changing landscape of the human experience. And nothing could be more true than today, because I believe the human experience is rapidly shifting right now. You have technology, you have internet. So no matter what socioeconomic status you come from, no matter where you are in the world, you pretty much have a smartphone and access to, all these different ways of living. So we're really, because of technology is an extension of human beings. I promise to bring all of this full circle. The human experience is shifting rapidly because there's so much interconnectivity, right? So it demands a new language, like international travel. That's 60 years old. It's pretty affordable to a lot of people within the last 10 years. Smartphone technology, smartphones, Wi-Fi is pretty much free everywhere. It's like water now. And a lot of people have smartphones, no matter what age they are. It's normal and common for, unfortunately, a child to have an iPad in front of them at the age of 3, which is crazy. And that's a whole nother story. The point that I'm making here is we're getting like all the narratives, everyone is getting a voice, everyone can share their experience, everyone is getting witness to whole other ways of being human that we've never had before in an exponentially short period of time. So the human experience is changing at an exponential rate. So we need a language that can help support people in expressing that change, help them process what's changing and shifting around their human experience. And we need guides and mentors to help people's identities shift with the changing human experience. Not a day goes by where I realize that, you know, one part of a person's identity is dying and a new part wants to come forward, but they don't have a guide or mentor. So they get trapped in that darkness and the shadow. Like I was talking to a guy last year, I remember his conception of a man was having a lot of money, having a good looking wife. And that was just it. That was his culture. He inherited that. But when life happened and he lost his good job, and once he lost his good job, his wife didn't want to be with him anymore because she was using him as a financial crutch. And that was the entire foundation of their relationship. That identity for him as a man totally died. But he had no new he had no idea or understanding of what happened to him. And he had no future vision of where his consciousness wanted to evolve to next. So I look at coaches, healers, and I like the word transformational presence better, and the art of transformation is they help people process and integrate the human experience. And in the 21st century, with technology, with internet, you know, exposure to whole new ways of being across the world, international travel, nothing could be more important. Like genuinely, nothing could be more important than being a well-equipped transformational presence to help human beings integrate the ever-shifting human experience. I mean, it's to give you an idea of how quickly technology is shifting everything. South Africa, like they don't even have land, like they don't, I think maybe even Africa as a whole, don't quote me on this. I know South Africa, they don't even have landlines. Like there's no landlines there. There was no point. Like we have telephone poles and landlines everywhere, but that's an outdated infrastructure. Like everyone has mobile phones now. So like they don't even have that. They skipped that entire generation. So we have to understand that the technology that is drastically shifting and creating a very different human experience, it's an extension of our humanity, and it's allowing us to have a different experience of being human at an exponential rate. And so and coaches and transformational presences, they fill the gap between that exponential change. They help people integrate their human experience, not just from a counseling perspective in the sense of this is safe space and you're cared for, but also like helping them understand the terrain they're navigating. Like, hey, this is a normal part of your experience. I know it feels horrible, but your old identity is just dying. Like that part of you as a man that looked at women as a social emotional object, or that part of you as a man that looked at money as a tool for status, like that part of your consciousness is dying, and naturally a new part of your consciousness and identity will emerge. That's why we're here. And we don't know what that looks like, but that's okay. And like that is that, but we don't have that framework in the counseling community or really in the coaching community. So I think it's really important to just understand the terrain that we're navigating. Everything is changing politically, socially, culturally. The financial structure is changing. I think the Federal Reserve printed like $4.6 trillion last year during the pandemic. So it's like, all right, like, come on, like it's just a charade all around. So understanding that, transformational presences and coaches and healers are so needed in the world, more than most people know. You need to be out there. More people need you than you realize.
So would you say that you're in a space more now of supporting transformational coaches and leaders and healers? Has that transitioned for you? Or are you still working with personal transformation? Where are you at in that?
It's a great question. So I mean, my business is threefold. It's really like helping the coaches, healers, transformational presences be full-time in their work. I think a lot of those people have insecurities at times, or, oh, am I good enough? Can I be good enough? Can I charge the prices that I want to? And it's like, all of that becomes irrelevant when you really actually understand the day and age that we're living in. There was, I mean, I think it was probably about 3.5 years ago. I mean, I've had 3 mentors since then. I've paid a lot of money for these mentors because I wanted to really be a leader in this space. And that's an important part of my identity, but also just me being a man, that's important to me. And I remember just being, once I finally got like what was really happening in the world, and I didn't see the solutions out there, I was like, oh, my insecurities or fears or worries are like inconsequential to the, like what's actually happening out there in the world. And like, that's like, if you want to create wealth, if you want to have fulfillment in meaning, and you want to have a place in the marketplace, that's all you got to do. It's just recognize, where's there a gap out there, a human need that isn't being filled? How can I fill it? And like, and like, you don't even need to worry about your, like, that's what I'm saying. You don't even need to do the inner work. Like, once all you need to do is recognize what's going on in the outside world, get a clear picture of what's happening in the outside world. And once you have a clear picture of what's happening in the outside world, you'll naturally, your heart will feel pulled to fill that space. Like I don't have time for insecurity. I don't have time for depression. I'm not saying.
Well,
like,
you've also already done that though. You've
right.
also already committed.
100%.
So,
yeah, 100%.
And you and I both know that as soul-driven entrepreneurs, that path is going to reflect back to you where there are opportunities for inner work. So it's like, whether you choose it or not, it's going to be a part of the journey anyway. And it's going to, we just get to choose how we respond to it. We get to choose how long we're going to stay into it, how we're going to navigate it.
100%. Yeah. That's a great, I'm glad you bring that up. Yeah. 100%.
One of the things I wanted, go ahead.
No, you can go. I'm done.
Well, one of the themes that I've been noticing as you've been speaking, and I'm super curious about, is there's this language around, like, I use the word attachment, you use the word identity, and you shared with us that one of your identities is being a leader. So how do we stay in the space? What would you say to somebody who's a little bit newer to the space of, like, we're still navigating, like, we're in the space of transformation, yet we still have a little bit of this identity attachment to even just being in transformation? Like, how do you, when do you know when it's that time to just pause?
Yeah, great question. So, and this brings back to your original question of, like, being detached but yet passionate at the same time. In the yogic language, there's a word for this. It's literally called Vigriya, like Vaigrya. And Vigriya is detached, passionate action. So like, that's why I love the Sanskrit language, because it has, words for these states that we don't really use in our English language, right? Like 1984. So that's like pretty much my mantra, is like, how can I be relentlessly passionate, but completely detached to the outcome? And what I found is, when you keep yourself in that space as much as possible, and sometimes I do get attached, and like that's okay. And like, I know when I'm attached, I have an awareness of when I attach, and I own the fact that I'm attached. And like, so there's nothing wrong with I was on a sales call the other day. I was like, no, I want this person to be a part of my program. Like, they will get it. They don't see it, but I see it, and I know about it. And my heart is convicted. So I do bold things that on the outside, you'd be like, yeah, this guy's definitely attached to the outcome. And in one sense, I am attached to the outcome, but it's not coming from a place of control. It's coming from a place of knowing and conviction. It's like, no, I know that this person would get value out of it. I know that it would be incredibly transformative for their work and their business. So I am going to go to what some would think would be extreme measures. Like, I'll call people up just randomly throughout the day. I won't like wait to schedule a session. Sometimes I'll schedule it, and other times I'll just go around and be like, no, I'm calling this person up right now. I'm calling them up on Messenger, or I'm calling up video call on Instagram. Like and it's my conviction. Like conviction is the greatest form of persuasion, and so sometimes people like look at me and they're like, dude, you're really pressuring me or something like this. And I'm like, yeah, oh, absolutely. Like that's an expression of my passion and my heart's conviction. Like convince and conviction, it's the same prefix, convincere in Latin, right? But that's the difference, is like when K-N-O-W, when you're coming from a place of knowing, it allows you to be bolder and bigger, and people
without attachment.
Exactly.
Without attachment, like
without attachment,
you get to open the space knowing that they get to choose, and
right,
that's it.
Right, exactly. And I don't want them to leave the conversation too early. But there's one person who will be a part of the next program. Like, I'm just going to call her up tomorrow because like she left the conversation too early. Like there wasn't enough to be said, but like my heart already knows that. So I'm acting from a place of knowledge, from a place of conviction, from a place of passion. And ironically, like passion and compassion, they're like the same thing. So sometimes your passion, your detached, like passion is compassionate energy. So it's the inner space that you come from. So I'm always aware of the inner space that I'm coming from. And I do stuff that's like, one of my dreams, and I'll do it probably within the next 2 years, is to do like Coachacon. I literally want to call it Coachacon. I want to put 5,000 people, in one space, have some of the world's like best coaches who I respect, both from a masculine perspective and a feminine perspective, put them all in the same room and do that once a year. And it's going to cost a lot of money. So I'm going to have to raise funds. I'm going to have to, persuade people, but like my heart's convicted on the value of it. So like, that's what I have no problem calling people up. I have no problem persuading. I have no problem disrupting their daily life, because like my conviction is greater than all of that. That's why if you're in this work, in any work in the world, you have to connect your purpose to your purpose, passion, profit. There is a center between all three of them.
Yes.
But most people never, I shouldn't say most, a lot of individuals don't stay in the game long enough to find that the center of all three of those. Right. So
yeah, it takes a lot of it. One of my longtime clients / listeners said to me the other day, just sent the most wonderful post. And I think this is important for us as coaches and healers to hear, is like, we really need to receive this. Like, just thank you so much for your tenacity in this work. And, as I hear you speak, it's like, that's what separates leaders and visionaries, really, truly. Your willingness, the willingness to continue through this. And so there's something in you. There's something in you that just keeps, like, there's this knowing that just keeps you moving forward. Do you know what that is? Is that something you can explain?
Oh, thanks for sharing that, Jen. I appreciate that. And the reflection, well, like it really, the universe is like, the world's always taking roll calls, and I love Elon Musk. I mean, yeah, he does some crazy stuff, like, and I'm sure his life is like a wreck in other places, but like, I really respect people who kind of, their entire life is around one thing. It's dangerous in one way, but in another way, like there was an interview where they asked him, they're like, everyone wants to be you. And he was like, dude, I don't even know if I want to be me, because it's like really painful. So it is very painful at times, but like when you see what's needed in the world, right? There's a roll call by the world where it's like, hey, anyone can fill this gap. Who's willing to step up? Like that's always happening. Like the world and the universe is always taking roll call for leaders. It's like, who's willing to step up in this space? So I think like I'm not kidding when I say the 21st century, politically, socially, familially, culturally, financially, the structures that have upheld the human experience are all shifting. And there's people who don't have a language that I've seen in the therapeutic community and the spiritual community who can make it modern. Like, I just haven't found that person yet. So, and if I did, I'd be like, I either want to partner with you or like you take the buck and carry it, right? So I'm not kidding when I say, like, once you see what's needed in the world and you see what's really happening and you have a voice and you bring a voice and a language to that you're not really seeing out there, it almost feels like it's not a choice. And it is, but in another sense, it feels like it isn't. And like, I totally related to that interview where, Elon was like, I don't even know if I want to be me. Cause there are some days where I'm like, I think this is stupid. Right. Like, even though I know it, I'm like, I kind of hate this, like there are some of those moments in my experience where I have that, but then being connected to a bigger purpose, seeing the human condition, seeing how I can work on the human condition, on the human experience, that's worth it to me. Like, and like, that's the risk factor. It's like, yes, there's pain. Yes, there's passion. Yes, there's profit. Yes, there's things to be gained, but I see it. I see what needs to be done. And I haven't seen anyone else who has a language for it. And it's not taking the martyrdom complex, but it's also not taking like the hero savior complex. It's kind of right in the middle. It's like, okay, like I've tried to walk away from this work because of random, you've experienced trauma in this work, bad business partners go wrong, betrayals. I've experienced that as well too. But what keeps a person going is they see the need for it out there in the world and the placement for it in the world. So it's like, okay, I have to, like, that's it. It's just like, even like Elon, like the stuff that the guy's done is amazing. Like, even with like the space, like what he's done with the rockets and helping them land and like being resourceful there. I mean, that's amazing. He's moved that frontier and he is a vision. Like, the guy like genuinely believes like, okay, I think we need to do more work on our own planet before we start trying to colonize others. But like, his vision is for the human condition to be a spacefaring species. Like, that is in our evolutionary development. And like, that's it. Like, it's recognizing that you are a force of the human condition. You are moving the evolution forward. And like, you're committed, you're aligned to that evolutionary force. And when you're aligned to that, it allows you to embrace challenges that a majority of people would just stop or quit or would turn around. But like, that's our nature. Like, I don't believe like we're just driven by survival. Like, I do believe we're driven by curiosity and exploration. Like, human beings did not need to go to space. By all survival mindsets, it was the stupidest thing ever. Like, if you really think about it, it's like, okay, I'm gonna strap myself to a rocket with a bunch of gasoline on it or like rocket fuel, and I'm going to blast myself up into an unknown terrain. Like, that's insane. Like, it goes against every Darwinian principle that you think of. But what really drives, I think, evolution forward isn't just survival, it's curiosity, it's imagination. And so if you tap into that force, curiosity, imagination, moving the human experience forward, moving the evolutionary force that moves itself through humans, that allows human beings to put itself in life and death situations. If you tap into that force, I mean, that's a very powerful force to tap into. And I think visionaries, Elon Musk, other people like that, like they see a bigger picture of the human condition. And like that does excite me. Like, human beings being on Mars, and, I could go on for stuff around this.
It's like, just the expansion of the human experience is what I hear you saying. And I like to call it creator consciousness. And what I've noticed is we really can't be in creator consciousness and consumer consciousness in the exact same moment. And so what I've noticed in my perception, what I notice is, you talk about avoidance. One of the biggest distractions that keeps us disconnected in this quickly evolving, exponentially evolving time that we're living in, which, by the way, Nine Waves of Consciousness was a book I read many years ago, and we're on the ninth wave. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like time just keeps speeding up. Are you, but you're a manifesting generator, right?
Yeah.
Are you?
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
am
yeah.
I. So we're like the time benders. Manifesting
Right.
generators are like
Right.
time benders. I like to call us time benders.
I
But
love that.
we can't be in creative consciousness and consumer consciousness at the same time. What I have found, and what I felt like the pandemic was a perfect opportunity for, was that in my work, which is focused on women, is the biggest distraction that is in consumer consciousness is this idea of like, I'm too busy, I'm overwhelmed. And so I'm avoiding the thing that I actually really need to do.
100%.
And then another thing I wanted to speak to that just came through, a couple of things. One is, you talked about sort of like, I use the word tenacity, that it takes to get to what separates the type of person who's willing to keep going. Like, what is that all about? One of the things that's been helpful for me to reframe the language or the words that some of the listeners might relate to is every quote failure or perception of that, to me or to us, has just gives us clarity. It gives us clarity on what's not working. So like we can be like, hallelujah, like that didn't work, so now I'm getting more clear on what does work, on who I want to become. And as I heard you speak, the thing that came through that I really loved, where we started our conversation about your transformation and sort of like then being at the level that you are now, what it takes to get to that next level. In my own words, what came through to me is like, it's almost this idea of like the death, right? It's life and death. It's the death of an old identity or the death of an ego, an old self. And the way I look at it after hearing you speak is, you got two choices. You're either going to let the old self die, or you're going to let the person that you could become, that dream, that vision that's possible, you can let that die. Which one's it going to be, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
really that's it. It's either you're willing to let go of all that, or you're willing to let go of what's in front of you. And it's, dang, if you look at it like that, it's like the choice is yours
Right.
and life is happening. What happens when I choose to step into who I'm becoming, with the belief that everything that I need is available should
Yeah.
I choose to receive and be in that. And what I want to ask you is, because I think this is super important for the listeners, because I feel like, okay, people are listening and they're like, well, okay, so they're willing, they're passionate, they can get there. But I want them to also hear me say that we've been through the shadow work multiple times to get to where we are. Um, so somebody who's listening, it's like, how do you know when, I guess, it's the right time? Or do you just think that it's always the right time? Or do
Yeah.
how do you navigate the time
That's
space?
yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So um first off, I gotta work under like I'll share the premise, like the premise that you're working under when you say that. Like, how do you know what right time it is to jump into your full creative efforts or your full business power or creating the vision for your life? Um, the premise under that is there is a version of me that like wants to create a new reality in a new version of me. And like it's like the responsibility of this version of me to create this bigger version of me in my reality, right? But like that, working under that premise, there's a lot of pressure under that.
Mm.
But how it actually works is this little me just like naturally becomes this thing through the journey of itself. So you don't have to be in small, like, okay, this is who I am. This is who I identify as. This is who I'm becoming. You don't have to, you just have to see what wants to come through you. Like, that's it. So it's placing the enough awareness inward and enough awareness outward and seeing how does this, millions of infinite year old consciousness want to express itself through me. Like human, like when you really think about it, we're so small. Like if we live healthily, we're probably like 80, 100 years old, right? But the intelligence, there's a greater intelligence that's always operating through us that is way bigger than our mind's conception and the idea of our life. Like there's an intelligence, like an intelligence, a guiding force that allows trees to grow, that allows plants to grow, and that's an intelligence that's much greater than our thinking mind and any idea that our mind could come up with for what our life should look like. So all we have to do is really just align ourselves with that intelligence, get in touch with that intelligence, which I do believe is our nature, and stay in that space as much as possible and just act from that inner space. And just recognize when you're out of that inner space, because that's what's created from that. Like we create our entire life from that space. It's just whether we're aware of it or not. So I don't look at it as so much as when's the right time to go all in, step forward. It's a process. Like last year, I had one of the biggest financial years of my life. I pushed myself further than I ever had. It was awesome, scary, terrifying, everything in between. I could do that again, but then I took a little bit of a break, and I'll probably do another push like that at some point, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years. I don't know. Like for me, the next push would be, coach a con, 5,000 people in one room, and I just was, that would be really fun if that could come through me, and it would serve the community in a really big way, and it would be exciting. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad do I want to do that? 7 or an 8. Okay, I want to do that in a 7, 8. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how willing am I to do that right now? Okay, 7 or an 8. So that creation is probably going to come through me pretty shortly here, right? So it's not so much as there's little me and I have this idea of how my life should be. It's more of there's little me, and how is the essence of this intelligence that's way bigger than me wanting to express itself through me. And it's just getting tapped into that. That's all it is.
What I love about what you said is it's almost like I'm hearing a lot of allowing.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting how sometimes our ideas and goals are actually what's limiting us, because we think
100%.
That's all we're looking at.
Yes.
And what happens when we allow ourselves to be resourced? I love the word resourced, because I think this is a huge disconnect in the community that I serve of feminine leadership. There's a disconnect in the allowing and the receiving of ourselves to be resourced by what's already abundantly available all around us. When you look at Mother Nature, everything is actually naturally abundantly available. So how are we different?
150%. And I love that point. I did a post the other day, and it was any amount of money, any amount of love, any amount of anything you could ever want is already present to the planet.
Yeah.
It's just, do you have the willingness, and do you have the skill set and the ambition to go get it? And do you have the purpose aligned to be able to go get it?
I would add the other side to that I notice is, are you open to receiving it?
Right.
I mean, truly open. And from where our conversation started, really the willingness to to be in that space of vulnerability, you got to clear out junk. You do,
Right.
like, you clear out the junk, you create the space, and you can create the space to receive more. And you and I've had conversations about how important healthy boundaries are. It's just, and
100%.
that's where the alignment comes in. The
Yes.
alignment is knowing what's serving you, what's not. That's why perceived failures can be clarity. And the more aligned we are in that clarity, then the more resourced we are, because we've created that space to allow ourselves. And I'm talking about being resourced from something much greater than us that's already there. And
100%.
money, food, relationships are all just reflections and co-creations of the naturally abundant energy in the universe anyway. It's just coming to us in different ways. It's based on
Absolutely.
where we are in our journey, which is
Abs-
when you start to understand, we actually have the ability to, it's like we get to work with the energy that's around us, and we get to choose what comes in, what goes out, and how we want to work with that, which is, I feel like,
right.
is, it's the energy of basically transformation. And the question I haven't gotten to ask you yet, that I really want to ask you yet before we come to a close, because I'm
Yeah.
being aware of the time, is you've talked a lot about, like, the willingness to be the person that identifies the gap and speaks to that in the world. So you have yours, you have your framework for transformation. You've told us about this, but you haven't told us what it is. So would you be willing to share some key concepts that really are outside the box of what's available now, because
Oh,
it's what I'm drawn to in your work. Can you share the framework, the key concepts, and so that can bring more people into the space of becoming curious about, how can I learn more about this? What is that for you? What's that framework? What are those key concepts?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So the framework for me, it's really like a bunch of A words, right? So first, awareness, like awareness of myself, awareness of my external world, where I'm at, awareness of my inner world. So like all of that and the dimensions of that. How does the mind and the thought and the emotions interact with the external world? How's the external world imprint itself upon me? So first there's an awareness. And then there's acknowledgement, right? So acknowledgement, okay, I was maybe a 12-year-old white boy who was bullied and thrown into trash cans, and who didn't have a loving mother, who couldn't give me the emotional resources that I needed. And like the story is real. Like, so the story is real. Acknowledge the story, but with awareness of what really has happened to your energy or your being, and where you came into the world and when, and how life impacted you and created you and influenced you. With that awareness, then you acknowledge the truth. Okay, yep, acknowledgement. This is really, okay, I did grow up in a lower socioeconomic status. Okay, I did, like, acknowledge all that truth, right? And then after the awareness, after the acknowledgement, you take new inspired action from who you want to create. Like, what is it now that you want to create, and how do you want to create yourself in the world? And you take relentless inspired action around that. And sometimes that can look like control. It can look dark. It can look like, I don't know what's going to come through me. Like, even with like the boundaries thing, like sometimes there's times where I respect boundaries, and there's other times where I relentlessly break them with respect and permission, but relentlessly break them nonetheless. Because a lot of people form boundaries under false premises or under trauma, and it's keeping them from living their fullest life. So like at me, like I always tell this, is your commitment to a sale, is a commitment to keeping the relationship preserved, or is it a commitment to the person's highest evolution? And there's times where I have to sacrifice a relationship or a sale for the person's highest evolution. So
Oh,
like, if like, there's
yeah.
times where I do break boundaries. Like there's times where I am like, okay, like I do, like, this is going to be awkward. Like, I don't like being in this space. Are you ready? Like, and so, compassionate energy, heart melting, that sometimes melts boundaries. Other times it's going to take a crack, more of a masculine whip. You can conduct it in a respectful, healthy way. but I mean, I scare people away all the time. And I'm like, some days that hurts my heart. And other days I'm like, no, they're not ready or they're not will. But like, it's a commitment to showing up as as a transformational presence. Like that's the
Yeah.
commitment, you know?
What are you, so what I heard: awareness, acknowledge, inspired action. What
Yeah. Oh,
else?
that's it right there. Just
Those are the three.
awareness,
Oh, I love that there's
acknowledgement, and
three.
action. Yeah. So like,
I love that it's simple.
yeah, it's totally simple. And just having that all the time. Like,
Yeah.
what's the awareness of the situation? What's the awareness of the dynamic? What's the awareness of what's happening? Okay, now I have to acknowledge the truth of it.
Right.
So what are your thoughts telling you? What are your emotions are telling you? Are they all congruent? So just acknowledge the truth of that and then just take action. And you never know,
Yeah.
you don't have to know what it's going to be. You
Yeah.
just have to be willing to, okay, this is the truth of the situation and what's happening. This is the environment that I'm navigating. I need to acknowledge the truth of it. And I just need to take inspired action. And it could look, I don't know how it's going to look. Like I always tell people, I don't know what I'm going to do moment from moment. Like I genuinely don't, because I'm connected to that place of pure creativity in the moment. Like I don't know if I'm going to be like, oh, like, no, I'm fucking breaking boundaries right now. Absolutely not. Like, not okay. Like, I see what wants to come through. I'm passionate about this. I know it's the best. I know it's the best for you. I know you may not trust me. Maybe you don't trust yourself right now in a decision-making
Right.
process, but my heart knows, let's do this. Let's go. I'm with you 150%. Sometimes that part of me comes through. Other times it's a pure surrender. Hey, I know you're not ready for it. This isn't for you. Yeah, like, you know where to find me. Like, I don't know what's going to come through me from moment by moment, but if you have an awareness of what the situation is, if you acknowledge the truth of what's occurring and what's happening in the space that you're in, inner and external space, and you're willing to take whatever that inspired action is, you're always going to be transforming and you're going to have a big impact in the world.
Yeah.
Because that's,
I always tell my kids the answer is no if you don't try. So,
right.
I mean, like, but, and then the flip side to that is, one of the things I've learned, that a tool that's always helped me is the awareness piece. I check in with myself. I do this little, is it aligned with my values? Is it the right time? Does it have to be me or this person if I'm co-creating, right? So it's like
100%.
the person, because sometimes, especially as manifesting generators at our best, like we are in the space of transformation and creativity all the time. So there is that invitation to pause and be like, respond in sacral authority of what is actually really aligned at this time.
Yeah. And there's times where we can create alignment as well too. Like sometimes people, oh, it's not aligned for me. I'm like, I know it's not aligned for you yet. We haven't talked about it enough. We haven't had a conversation. I haven't showed you your being what's on offer. I can see it because I've traversed this path. Will you stay in the conversation to see if this is in alignment? So like using our voice, connected to our heart, our values and our convictions and our power, and expressing and coming from that inner space in the world. So like sometimes people will say, oh, it's not in alignment for me right now. And it's like, yes, I totally understand why it wouldn't be in alignment for you right now, because we just met. Or so like,
well, and then what happens when you give yourself permission to reframe that? Like what's the, because there's a story either way, right? Like what happens, whatever that story is preventing you from the thing that you're seeking.
Right.
So what happens when you shift it?
100%.
Right.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
100%. Yep.
Well, you did that with me, because I'm like having a story just around this balance that I think many women that I know, because I work with these women,
Right.
It's just the story around, how do I balance being an awesome rock star mom and wife with having an amazing career? And it's that the time and place that we're in is shifting around that, because for so long, women like myself and many of the women in my community have tried to do it in a way that just didn't serve us, and we're burnt out and overwhelmed and distracted and busy, and then we feel unfulfilled on the inside because we didn't do it from the inside out.
Right.
But when we really shift that energy of from the inside out and and receiving and taking the aligned action, right? Like
Yeah.
manifestation requires aligned action. It's not just magic. Like when we
Right.
can really be in that balance of recognizing the fullness of the experience and empowering ourselves to choose, usually the thing that keeps us from stepping forward is the exact thing that we're meant to work through, of course, which is like you get to choose. Are you going to go through the doorway and break up that old story right now, or are you going to just stay where you are? Like you get to
Yeah.
choose.
Yeah. And the burden, it doesn't always have to be on you to be a rock star entrepreneur, a rock star mom all the time. Like you can put that on others. Like, hey, I can't be a good mom today because of whatever reason. And can you be a great
Yeah.
daughter and just give me compassion? Like you
Yeah, you
have the
get to
right.
ask for
Yeah,
help. You get to be
exactly.
supported. You get to receive. You get to be broken if
Yep.
in that moment or whatever. You literally get to choose. There isn't anything that we really have to do. We do get to choose, although we do have that inner knowing that we're here for a purpose. But when we live in that space and energy of just allowing, as you said, and taking the inspired aligned action from that place, that's really sort of like what we hear is like the zone of genius. But energetically, it's really in that flow state of just like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not affected by the outside world around us. And it's not selfish. It's actually because it's like I think of a spring. Like I live in Florida, so we have springs that are just naturally bubbling up from the earth, and so I feel resourced as a spring to just bubble and give more, but not from a place of overflowing, from a place of being resourced, which is
Right.
totally different. Um,
100%. Yeah.
I want to ask you one more question
Sure. Yeah.
before we bring this to a close. I feel like we could turn this
Go for
into a
hours.
three part series. I want to say before we bring this to a close, if you don't know Jared, he has an amazing YouTube channel. And what I loved about it was really seeing your personal transformation over the years on YouTube. You've covered so many different topics. We can see your passion for science and spirituality, but also for leadership and for relationships and for growth. And there isn't a conversation I didn't see that you haven't had. I mean, I'm sure there is, but they're so it's such an expansive energetic container for transformation in so many ways, and I love that. So definitely check out his YouTube channel. The question I want to ask you and just leave the listeners with is, what I'm going to say it in two ways, and one of them will land for you. What are you committed to, or what are you a stand for in the world? Like what is that authentic soul alignment imprint of your soul in human form? What is it?
It's great. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say like honoring the transformation and evolution of the human experience and just being a catalyst and an integrator for that. Like sometimes I wish I didn't have that, to be perfectly frank, because it is painful at times, but other time, but when you transform like sometimes I get triggers, shit thrown on me. And I'm just like, and I know how to like draw boundaries and speak boundaries and things like that. But there's times where my heart's just like, no, like I have to take a stand for, like, I see a person, I genuinely see people's potential. Like I'll actually see how the infinite consciousness wants to express itself through another person. And so if I see that, if I see that, like that's in my perception, I'll ask permission to, go there and hit the heart or strike the heart or strike the person's energy system to bring that out. And it's sometimes it's extremely painful and overwhelming because I see where everyone is along their own human journey, from some perspective, like how, is consciousness working on financial development, spiritual development, social development, emotional development, communicational development, sexual development. So like I'm always seeing what line of development a human being is working on. And it's hard for me to turn off that filter, and it can become overwhelming. Even like with my family, sometimes I'm just like, I love them, but I'm like, oh my God, like this is where my sister's at in her development. And this is where but I draw boundaries and I don't go into it, but the perception can be overwhelming sometimes because I
Yeah.
just see it wherever I go. And I see deeper at times than what most people don't even see within themselves. The more inner work you've done, you can see deeper into people than they may have even seen in themselves. And I champion the human potential, but they might not want that potential champion yet for whatever reason. And like the human ego doesn't like to be told what it is and what it isn't and what it's becoming. It's the very nature of the ego is to defend its identity in that moment, right? So when I see what wants to come through a person, and I know what wants to come through a person because I have a mastery of the craft, and I say that with humbled pride. It can be really frustrating because sometimes I'll see it. Like I hung up on a potential client the other day. I couldn't be in the conversation. I was like, I love you. I wish you the best. I can't be in this conversation anymore. Like literally, because there was so much shadow, unintegrated shadow that I could see, and I could see the light that wanted to come through them, but they couldn't see that. And they could only see me through the lens of their development up to that point. So like, if you are doing this work, your heart, you got to get used to not being perceived the correct way and still keep an open heart. And that's like, that can be incredibly painful. Like
it takes a
being
lot of courage.
Definitely.
It takes a lot of courage. And I think I remember one of your YouTube videos talked about like the more visible we become in our true self, the more vulnerable that rejection is.
Oh,
or something.
100%.
I don't know what the words were, but I was like, oh, that's the thing.
Yeah.
For sure.
Open heart. Yeah. Open power. Yeah, absolutely.
But what's, just to close this, what's on the other side of that though? Like, what's the feeling on the other side of it? What's the experience?
Motivation, passion, purpose. You'll never have an empty bank account. Like everything is on the other side of that. And that's what's crazy about it, because you want to bring every human being to that place, but not everyone is ready and willing to go there. And that's the hardest thing. It's like you can have more of a commitment to a person's heart's desires because you've owned your heart's desires, but they don't have that commitment to their heart's desires. Yeah.
It's the balance of being a coach for sure.
You can have that sympathy and that compassion and that empathy and love and that champion for human potential, but they're not willing to go there. And they will literally perceive you as an enemy if you try to push them in that space, because a part of them has to die. Like a part of their ego and identity actually has to die. That's why I love sales, because if you genuinely believe in your product and service, someone will die in the conversation.
Yeah, it's true.
Like someone's frame is going to die.
Yeah, I love that reframe actually, because it's really just a powerful conversation to invite people in is really what it is. Like that's what the energy is.
Yeah. One of my mentors. Oh, sorry. You can go.
Oh, I was going to say one of the words that comes through for me in my experience is just freedom. Like the sense of just freedom. Like, 100%. But it's like that deep sense of knowing and trust and just like literally knowing that nothing can really break you. I mean, of course, there are things that we love deeply and that we are attached to as a mother, like children, that whole thing. But when you've really given yourself permission to go there, when you've been in the deep, dark, ugly spaces, it's like, it's like,
that's it. Yeah. No, and that's it. It's like, you can't die. You can't break. You've already been broken in as much as possible. So it's like nothing can break you. You may take hits and it may be painful, but like literally beyond pain, when you cross the threshold of I'm not avoiding pain and I'm not chasing pleasure, you get into the realm of bliss. Like genuinely, that's what bliss is 100%. Emotionally. So it may be painful to live that way, but it's also blissful as well too. And people will want to be connected with that energy. They'll feel it. So as painful as it may be, if you're coming from that inner space, there is freedom. You can have whatever you want. There's not a fear to go after whatever you want, whether it's money, whether it's resources, you just go for it. And it's painful at times, but there's also like we're not taking any of it with us. Like we're all going to die. All the relationships that we have, they're not going to be with us. Like like we're losing it all. So like stop playing like you have something to lose, because you're going to lose it all. Be strategic. Calculated courage is the best way to put it. You know, like
Yeah.
you're going to lose all the relationships that you have, even the ones that your heart loves most. You're going to lose all the money that you have. You're going to lose the body. You're going to lose your identity. So stop playing like you have anything to hang on to, because it's already on its way out.
Right.
And
Everything's
that, but
temporary.
it takes that consciousness to create everything you really actually do want on the earth. And that's our natural state. Like that's everyone's birthright.
100%. I love that. Thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time, for your energy, for your heart, for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I want to give people the resources to find you. What do you have coming up next? Tell us about
Yeah.
anything that you have to share.
Absolutely. Transformationalcoaching.co, not .com. I got like great resources there around building your business up full time. There's also some classes there. We do have our leadership course, a transformational leadership course, which is coming up. That's in July. That's that think tank of just like people who are in the transformational space. And it's more of a conversation. It's not so much a program. So that's what we're doing in July that I'm really excited about. And yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. And of course, your YouTube channel too. There's
Oh
a
yeah,
lot there.
transformational
So,
coaching YouTube channel
yeah.
there.
Yeah, lots of really good conversations on there. So, well, thank you so much for your time and your energy. And yes, I look forward to many more conversations around this. And
Thanks for
thank you for
having me,
just
Jen.
being
It's been
here.
great.
Absolutely. Aloha.